When it comes to sales figures, Triumph's 400 models have long since become a hugely important pillar in the portfolio. For 2026, a fourth new model is now joining the lineup, namely the Tracker 400. And whether this bike rides just as sportily and as well as it looks, that's what I found out for you today in southern Spain. Hello and welcome to 1000 PS TV. It was only 2 years ago that Triumph launched the 400 series. In the meantime, an incredible 180,000 units have already been sold worldwide. That's a pretty substantial number, even if, of course, many of these bikes were also sold in Asia, where they're built by Bajaj in India. Even so, it shows just how important these bikes are to the British brand's international sales success. As we all know, it all started with the base model, the Speed 400, and its Scrambler X sister. Those two bikes are largely responsible for that high sales figure. For some time now, there has also been the Scrambler XC. In the end, it's basically a Scrambler X upgraded with tubeless wire spoke wheels and a few accessories. Technically though, it's otherwise identical to the Scrambler X. Sadly, the Thruxton 400, which is brand new for 2026, is not available in German-speaking markets. That's the super sport model, so to speak, with a half fairing. Triumph says there simply isn't enough sales potential for it in German-speaking countries, which is why it won't be coming to dealers here. But what is coming to dealers is the brand new Tracker 400. And that's what I'm sitting on right now. You can see it here in the cockpit shot. And this bike is the first Triumph motorcycle whose styling takes its cues from the well-known flat track bikes from America. You know, that spectacular racing series with some proper drifts. And with the Tracker 400, they now want to echo exactly that cool look. The bike is already available now in Germany and Austria. In Germany, it costs 6,245 euros plus additional charges, and in Austria, around 6,900 euros. So you really do have to say it's pretty incredible to come in below the 7,000 euro mark. And for that, you are getting a lot of motorcycle here. And I'll tell you a bit more about that now. What sets the Tracker apart from the other 400 models is not just the looks, but also the engine output. Because apart from the Thruxton, which is not available here in German-speaking markets, the Tracker is the only one putting 42 horsepower onto the tarmac. The other bikes only have 40 horsepower. Torque, on the other hand, is the same. All the bikes in the range have 37.5 Newton meters of torque. Yes, the extra 2 horsepower, or 5%, comes from different camshafts and a different engine tune. The flywheel mass has remained exactly the same. Even so, the Tracker revs 1,000 revolutions per minute higher at the top than the other bikes in the range. The rest of the engine specs are exactly the same. We have a 398 cubic centimeters single cylinder with double overhead camshafts, 4 valves, and I think that extra 1,000 revolutions per minute of maximum revs really suits the Tracker well. It is a very sporty model within the range, and it is great fun to rev it right out to the absolute limit. And as for the 37.5 Newton meters of torque, I can tell you that according to Triumph, 80% of that figure is already available from 3,000 revolutions per minute. That means you always have a nice bit of drive there as soon as you move the throttle. Speaking of the throttle, it is ride-by-wire. On the electronic side, there is also traction control, which can be switched off, and Bosch ABS, but that's about it. There is no cruise control and there is no quick shifter either. Unfortunately, there is no quick shifter in the accessories catalog either. So with the 400s, things stay fairly Spartan. But yes, at a price of 6,245 euros in Germany and just under 6,900 euros in Austria, you cannot really expect too much. Visually, what immediately stands out on the Tracker 400 are of course the side number boards. On top of that, we have a fly screen at the front as standard and a seat cowl that can be removed very easily with 2 screws. By the way, the tank has also been completely redesigned. It is not the same tank as on the other models, it has a different shape, but it still holds 13 litres just like the other Triumph 400 models. Triumph has also come up with quite a lot in terms of colours. There is a yellow version which I like a lot, a silver one and a black one, and of course all of them have the bold Tracker lettering on the tank. So yes, it definitely stands out visually, but I think a sport replica motorcycle can absolutely get away with that. And something else that is really worth mentioning is the quality of the finish. I have to say, even though these bikes are built in India, the quality control clearly seems to be right on point. Everything is really nicely done and all the cables and hoses are neatly tucked away as well. That is not the case with every manufacturer in this price bracket in the A2 segment, and that is especially impressive given the low purchase price. Of course, you have to put it into perspective and say that all manufacturers in this segment are going after competitive pricing. But even so, I think Triumph still manages to build a really well-rounded overall package that feels harmonious and is also nicely finished. When it comes to wheels and tires, Triumph naturally goes with a 17-inch format, with a 150 section rear tire. The bike comes as standard with Pirelli NT60RS tires, an old familiar one that works really well on the road and still looks a bit off-roadish. It just suits a tracker perfectly. The wheels are aluminium cast. If you want wire spoke wheels, then at the moment in the 400 range, you can really only buy the Scrambler XC. That is the only bike right now that comes with wire spoke wheels. And as for the braking system, we have a 300mm disc at the front and a 4-piston radial brake caliper. And as far as performance is concerned, all I can say is this. For this lightweight motorcycle, we are only talking about 173 kilos here with a full 13-litre tank. It is more than enough. We have great transparent brake feel and enough power to brake using just one finger. So despite the bike's affordable purchase price, you do not have to make any compromises when it comes to safety. There is Bosch ABS on board as well as traction control. So all in all, it has everything you need for sensible money. The Tracker 400's cockpit is quickly explained. A large analog round instrument on the left-hand side, an LCD display on the right-hand side with a big gear indicator in the middle, a fuel gauge, a couple of trip meters and a consumption display. You do not really need more than that. There is no smartphone connectivity, but in my opinion, that is not really necessary in this segment anyway. The controls work perfectly via a single button on the left-hand switchgear. I honestly would not know what more you would need in this motorcycle class. It suits the bike perfectly, it is easy to read, and all in all, it is actually a really nice cockpit. The ergonomics on the Tracker 400 are dynamic and sporty, but only just short of being uncomfortable. I'd like to give you a comparison with the base model, the Speed 400. Compared to that, we have handlebars that are set 13 centimeters lower here. The handlebars are also 2 centimeters wider. And when it comes to the foot pegs, they are moved 9 centimeters further back and 3 centimeters higher. So in the end, you do have to say that the knee angle is of course a bit tighter here. At my height of 1.78 meters, it was still perfectly comfortable. For really tall riders though, it will probably feel a bit too folded up. But in the end, all of this means more weight over the front wheel, a better feeling for the front end. And I have to say, you can really notice that when riding quickly. You get a lot more front end feedback here than, for example, on a Scrambler 400. The riding position in general feels a bit more aggressive because your elbows are stretched out more. But even so, you can still live with it on longer rides as well. Seat height, by the way, is 805 millimeters. But that is actually only of secondary importance because the inner leg arc is really small. So you have a very slim seat and you can get your feet to the ground very easily. So it is definitely a manageable, easy to ride motorcycle even for shorter riders. When it comes to suspension adjustability, the Tracker 400 remains rather unspectacular. At the front, we have a 43mm upside-down fork with 135mm of travel, and at the rear, a shock with 130mm of travel. Preload is adjustable there. Other than that, there are not many changes you can make to the suspension. For me, at roughly 70 kilos in riding gear, it works perfectly. In terms of setup, I would say it is firm from the factory, but not uncomfortable. You get really good feedback from the road surface. That also underlines and supports the fun factor of this light, agile package. And it is great fun flicking from one corner to the next. There are no major changes when it comes to the frame either. It is a steel tubular frame with a bolt-on rear subframe and an aluminium twin-sided swing arm. So all pretty standard stuff, but simply harmonized well. And as for the service interval, we are looking at 16,000 kilometers here. That is, of course, a huge number and sounds brilliant. But when you look at it realistically and read the small print, it says, or once a year. That means once a year, even if you ride very little or less than 16,000 kilometers, you still have to go to the Triumph dealer for a service if you want to enjoy the 4-year warranty. And that is a pretty strong statement. 4 years of carefree ownership with this bike really shows that Triumph has confidence in it, and that gives the customer a genuinely good and reassuring feeling. The traction control can be switched off. I've just tried that. And even on a dry road, you really do not need it because 42 horsepower is very easy to control. And I have to say the throttle response is also very refined. The clutch is light, the gearbox is crisp. So I really do have to say, even though you basically have to do without electronic gimmicks here, you do not miss anything. It is simply a solidly built motorcycle. It needs very little effort at the lever, both at the clutch and at the brake. There is really not much to criticize here. Something else I really like is this punchy, burbling, throaty engine sound. As for the exhaust system, you do not really need to invest in accessories there either. So for the purchase price, what you are getting here is a genuinely rounded, fully fledged motorcycle that can be huge fun on tight, twisty roads. And in the city as well, I think. The bike is just unbelievably slim. When you stand in front of it, it almost looks like a racing bicycle. And I have to say, honestly, that makes it a brilliant weapon for city traffic too. So all I can say is hats off. The Tracker 400 really is a motorcycle I would personally put in my garage, if I still had space. I've now spent quite a bit of time riding the Scrambler 400XC and have just switched back onto the Tracker 400. And it has become very clear to me again just how big the difference in riding feel between these two bikes actually is. You would hardly believe how much the slightly longer suspension travel, the different setup, the taller handlebars on the Scrambler, and the different wheel sizes, namely 19 inches at the front and 17 inches at the rear, really change the way the bike behaves. I have to admit, quite honestly, if you know that you are never going to ride on gravel and will be riding exclusively on tarmac, then you will definitely have more fun on the Tracker because it is simply more precise on the road and gives you more feedback. Yes, it just feels a bit more agile as well. That means if you really do want to ride on gravel roads, there is probably no way around the Scrambler. But otherwise, I have to say, when it comes to the greater fun on tarmac, the Tracker clearly delivers that more convincingly. Another thing I really like about the Tracker 400 is the exhaust sound, because it is punchy and deep and yet still not loud. So it is absolutely neighbor friendly. If you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and start the motorcycle outside the house, nobody's going to complain. And I really like that, and Triumph deserves praise for it, because it proves that you can have a cool sound without having to be antisocial. Yes, with 42 horsepower, you are obviously not going to tear up trees, but it is absolutely enough to have a lot of fun on twisty roads, especially because Triumph's single-cylinder engine is really very flexible. You can see it now. I am riding in 5th gear at the moment, and I can still pull nicely out of the corners and accelerate well without it becoming torture for the engine. And if you really want to make brisk progress, 3rd gear is your best bet, because that one pulls beautifully pretty much everywhere. So what can I tell you? You really can ride it quite lazily on the gears. The engine is very flexible, just as you would expect from a single cylinder. And that is also where this easy riding behavior comes from, something that especially beginners will probably warm to very quickly. All things considered, the Tracker 400 is a down-to-earth all-round talent without much fuss. If you want more high-tech, then you simply have to look in another segment. Because we really do have to admit here, you are getting a lot of motorcycle for genuinely moderate money. And to be honest, I find it quite hard to come up with negative points here. If you forced me to name something, then first of all, it would probably be that there is no quick shifter. And the second thing is that with 42 horsepower, the engine gets a bit labored above 100 kilometers per hour. On the other hand, up to 100 kilometers per hour, it is a genuinely excellent single-cylinder engine. It also makes the bike, at 173 kilograms fully fueled, feel really light. The agility is sensational. The suspension is really nicely balanced, harmonious, not too firm, not too soft. It is genuinely well done, and we have ergonomics that support a dynamic, sporty riding style, but without becoming uncomfortable. A Brembo braking system that works well. You really cannot expect more, and you do not need more in this performance class. All in all, it is a really lovely motorcycle, well made, with a great many advantages and very few drawbacks, and you cannot even hold the price against it. Right then, that's it from me again from this test ride. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. And I'm looking forward to us being back out on the road together again soon. Yours, Clemo.